Welcome to the terminal operating system, BELLEROPHON. Today we're going to be looking at how the system manages the various business flows processed by an empty container terminal. BELLEROPHON is an operations-driven system where the operations reflect the work being carried out on the terminal itself. These operations are defined in terms of the resources required to complete the work, and this means the staff, the vehicles, and the equipment, and the time required. The operations are then linked to the individual containers, and BELLEROPHON uses orders to link the operations to the containers. So let's have a look at BELLEROPHON's orders screen. Here we can see a few orders listed. Although the orders can be entered manually, the vast majority of orders are automatically generated by BELLEROPHON and require minimal user intervention. One of the ways in which BELLEROPHON automatically generates orders is through the system's integrator. So taking a quick look at the integrator screen for a brief background. EDI files received from the shipping lines, the freight train lines, and the trucking companies contain a wealth of information on the containers that are due to be either delivered or picked up at the terminal. BELLEROPHON then applies templates to the contents of those files to automatically generate the orders. And these orders will contain scheduled and sequenced operations that automatically generate the work that needs to be completed for managing the containers. So let's take a quick look at this import order. And here we have information on the vessel and voyage and the estimated time of arrival, and here we have the information on the containers themselves. As you can see, I have included some test data with a few different container sizes and a few different container types. And for each of these containers, we have a port operation to discharge, and a warehouse operation to move the container from the quayside to its planned first point of rest location within the terminal. And finally, a standard container inspection operation. So let's plan the berthing of our approaching vessel. BELLEROPHON's berth planning screen is very user-friendly, enabling the waterway coordinator to select the terminal key splits and to specify the approach and position of the ship. Although this vessel is not due for a while, we'll go ahead now and process the arrival ahead of schedule, just for the sake of this demonstration. So if we just select our voyage and select the splits on the key and confirm. And now we can proceed with positioning the ship. Okay, so here we have the marine gate screen. And I've preloaded our vessel and voyage. And just below the details of the vessel, you can see the orders that are associated with this ship. BELLEROPHON's AIS tracking module would automatically record the ship as arrived in real time, but as this is a demonstration, I'll manually set it here. In the grids below, you can see the various cargo lists for the ship corresponding to each order. The loading list, the discharge lists, the restow lists, and also an overview too. Now that the vessel has arrived, the pending work can be carried out and recorded. So let's begin with discharging our import containers. In real time, Bellerophon's mobile app would normally be used on a portable device by a member of staff working out on the terminal. But to demonstrate the completion of the operational work now, we'll keep it simple and use the desktop equivalent, which is Bellerophon's work list screen. So let's filter out the port operations for our import order. And complete a few of the discharge container operations. And as you can see, the knock-on effect in the marine gauge screen is that the containers have moved from the to discharge list into the discharge list, and this can also be viewed in the overview list. Okay, so going back to the work list screen, let's now select all and complete them all in one move. Okay, so that's 37 actioned. And if we now move back to the marine gauge screen and do a refresh, you can see that all of the containers have now been moved from the to discharge list into the discharged list. And this is also reflected in the overview tab. To complete the process, we will now assign the action codes to the warehouse operations. So moving back to the work list screen once more, and moving across to the warehouse operations tab, let's once again filter out our order number. And we'll now multi-select these warehouse operations just like we did with the port operations. So if we select all, and as you can see here, the system tells us that we've selected the 40 containers. And we'll now proceed with actioning each of them. And what this is doing is it records each container being successfully moved from the quayside into its planned first point of rest location within the terminal. Okay, so let's take a quick look at the stock overview screen, which lists all of the containers in the terminal. So we do a refresh here, and this is just basically a grid view list of all the containers that are on the terminal in the yard. And what we can do now is filter out our order number to see these newly imported containers residing in stock. Okay, as you can see, the system tallies up at the bottom the 40 containers. And in this screen, you've got a wealth of information corresponding to each container. And we can also see the stock level and location details in each container type in the product screen itself. So if we move across here, as you can see, I've selected one of the container types on the order. And if we just filter out the customer for this particular order, you can see the 5 containers of that container type listed in stock. And I'll just give you a little bit of background on the product screen itself. As you can see, you've got a wealth of information on the structure of the container itself, the stacking information associated with the container, the weight, the dimensions, as well as all the stock levels associated with the yard. Our 3D terminal view screen is currently undergoing redevelopment, but that will be included in our new BELLEROPHON 3 upgrade. I mentioned the inspection operations earlier, and these are standard IMO container inspections that are passed automatically and failed by selection. So let's take a quick look at the system's inspection screen for a brief insight. So we'll just select our import order and load up the inspection for one of these containers. And here we have the various groups associated with the standard IMO check: the undercarriage, the doors, the interior, the exterior, and the floor and the roof. And these are passed by default and then failed by selection. So let's load up the second one, which is color-coded differently. And this is telling us that it does have a failed check. So if we move along once more, as you can see, the system enables the user to record a wealth of information on the failed check: the damage associated with it, the severity, the liability, and the responsible third-party repair. It also gives you the ability to store images associated with each failed check, and also notes. Okay, so now that all the operations on the import order are complete, we can now take a look at the other orders associated with the vessel. The marine gate screen tells us that there are 2 export orders associated with this vessel. So let's take a look at those orders in the order screen. The first of these export orders is actually linked to another order, which is a receiving order. And on this receiving order, the containers have been transported into the terminal by train. So if we take a look at the receiving order for a brief insight into the data. And here we can see the details of the train itself. And all of this information is brought through from BELLEROPHON's train and call maintenance screen, which sits in another module. Moving across the tabs, here we have the containers. So we have 10 containers coming in. And here we have the gate operations. And we've got a rail gate in associated with each container, and a rail gate out associated with the unloaded train. And here we have the port operations to unload the containers from the train. And finally, we have the warehouse operations to move the container from the train to the first point of rest location in the terminal, and the standard container inspection. And we can go a little further here and take a look at when these containers came in on the train, in the train gate screen. And this screen is similar in design to the marine gate screen. In the midsection, we can see the details of the train, when it arrived and when it departed. And in the lower section, we can see the containers that were unloaded. So going back to orders and loading up the actual export order. we can see once again the details of the ship. And moving across the tabs, we can see each of the containers that came in on the train. And the warehouse operations. First of all, we have a standard pre-export container inspection. And then the movement operation to move the containers from the locations to the quayside in preparation for export. And the final operation is the port operation to load the container on board the berthed vessel. And these movement and port operations have been auto-sequenced and scheduled to begin following the completion of the discharge of the import containers. So just like before, let's complete these operations in the work list screen. Okay, so that's the movement operations completed. And that's the loading operations completed. And as you know, the inspection operations, like I said before, are automatically passed. So if we now go into the marine gate screen and do a quick refresh, select our export order, you can see that the containers have moved from the loading list into the loaded list. And this is also reflected in the overview tab. Our final export order is 201238. So if we take a look at that in the orders screen, and as you can see, it's also linked to a receiving order. So if we load up the receiving order, we can see that this container arrived in by road on a flatbed truck. And once again, there are operations to gate in the loaded truck, to move the container off the truck and into the planned location, and to inspect the container, and to gate out the unloaded truck. Moving back to the main information tab, we can see that this order was automatically generated by BELLEROPHON's check-in screen. So let's take a quick look at that screen. And the check-in out module screen has been designed as an extremely user-friendly medium for processing the arrival and departure of trucks that are dropping off and picking up cargo. And this can be operated by the user from the PC desktop, or a mobile toughbook or laptop, or by the truck driver using a self-service kiosk. And as we move through the tabs, you can see that the screen provides for the drop-off or pickup of cargo, and that this includes the fields corresponding to the truck, the driver, the companies involved, and the specification of the items involved, such as the containers. And this screen will process both pre-announced and ad hoc truck arrivals. And when a container drop-off is processed in this screen, the receiving order that we were just looking at is automatically generated, along with the export order. And we find that this facility is well liked with our clients, as it requires minimal user intervention. And to round things off, there is a checkout scan screen which provides a single click solution for gating out a departing truck and automatically completes the operations on the receiving order. So let's complete the operations on the linked export order for this container. And we'll assume that the inspection was passed, and we can now complete the movement operation to the quayside. So if we go to work lists and warehouse operations, and complete our movement operation, and finally we'll load it on board by completing the port operation. And if we revert back to the marine gate screen and do a quick refresh and reselect our export, you can see that the product has moved from the loading list to the loaded list. There's our container, and this is also reflected in the overview tab. And this completes the work associated with the vessel and voyage at the terminal. So in real time, the vessel would now depart, and BELLEROPHON's AIS tracking module would automatically record the ship as sailed and finalized. But as with the ship's arrival, I'll complete this manually for the purposes of the demonstration. Okay, so in the marine gate screen, let's now change our display so that we're looking at all of the orders instead of the individual orders. And we can now see in the vessel lists below all of the products that have been loaded and all of the products that have been discharged, and also this is reflected in the overview tab. So let's now record our vessel as being sailed. And finally, we'll set the call as being finalized. And this completes the business flows. So now we can take a quick look at the impact of these flows on the stock. So if we move to the stock overview screen, and as you can see, I filtered out the containers corresponding to our import order number and used the 40 in total. And if we take a copy of the global unique identifier, the container number of one of the containers that have been exported. So let's take the one on the final export order, which came in by road, and go back to stock overview and do a search for that one. And as you can see, it's no longer listed because it's been exported. It's no longer in stock. But nothing is actually deleted in BELLEROPHON. A thorough audit trail is always maintained. So if we remove the hide gone flag, you can see that the container can still be found, can still be listed. Here we have the item gone column, and this flag is ticked, telling us that the container has left stock. Well, I hope you enjoyed this demonstration. If you have any questions or would like more information, please don't hesitate to contact us. Thank you.